This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hi, and welcome to Militantly Mixed, a podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Mane, and you are listening to my just woke up voice, which I can't tell if it doesn't sound exactly like my regular everyday voice, but I was really tired last night. I went to bed hella early, like 8:30, 9 o'clock or something like that. And so as a result, I'm awake hella early for work today. I thought I'd take this opportunity to go ahead and record my intro for this week since the house is quiet. And I got a few announcements to make. I think I've mentioned it a little bit. I've been mentioning it before that I have been doing this podcast thing full time for the last few months, or the entire time of doing these shows, and was hoping to be able to transition this into a full-time thing forever, but you know, we're early days. We're still only 4 months in, and it takes a while for you to generate the kind of audience and stuff so that you can survive on this life full-time. So mama had to go back to work, and I started a new job not last week, but the week before. Still kind of getting used to the new gig and the new schedule. That's been the big adjustment, because I used to go to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Now I go to bed at 11 or 12. And so I'm still in my adjustment mode, but so far I haven't failed on getting a show out on time, which is good. I think the latest I've been is about a half an hour late. So I feel pretty good about that. But next week, I am going to take a bit of a hiatus, not related to the job necessarily, but I have the opportunity to give a presentation on intersectional identity at Sierra College in Rockland, California next week. I'm really excited about it. This is for the Spectrum Pride event put on by Sierra College, and I was given the opportunity through someone who's actually a friend of mine, Professor Johnny Terry. He was my then high school best friend, now husband's first philosophy teacher, and completely changed the direction of my husband's life. He used to be a fairly bad student, not very focused, didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. He took Johnny Terry's philosophy class, I think Philosophy 101 or Logic. Actually, it was his Logic class, and that totally changed the direction. Now my husband is a logician and a professor of philosophy and things like that. So that's how he and my husband got close. Simultaneously, though, Johnny and I developed a friendship because I was his technical director for distance learning classes. I was the person behind the booth, switching cameras and zooming in and things like that to make sure that the distance learning class got on cable on time. And so we had sort of this like Wizard of Oz voice in the booth relationship, and we became friends that way, which was just a coincidence. I think the timing was about the same time. So over the many years, we got really close, and Johnny Terry actually was the person who married us. He did our ceremony for us, and we've remained friends all these years. And he offered this opportunity for me to come out to the college and give a presentation on identity as intersectional, the mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist woman's perspective. I'm excited about it. I am a little nervous because this is the first time I'll be giving a presentation about something I'm personally passionate about. So I hope it goes well. And as a result, I'm shutting all operations down this week so that I can focus and put together the best presentation that I possibly can first time out the gate. So I do have some of the shows are going live next week, but Militantly Mixed is going to take a 1 week break. And when we come back, we are changing days of the week that we're airing. And that is because Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition, which normally airs on Tuesday, is also making a change. There's a lot of changes going on in the ManeHustle media situation right now. So Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition normally airs on Tuesday. And Blurred Vision and I also record on Tuesdays. So we're getting an episode a week later every week. And that show doesn't generate as much of a listenership as Black Radical Queer or Militantly Mixed does, and I think it's because because lately we've been getting more and more depressed about our subject matter. And on that show, we talk about blackness from the mixed black perspective, but inevitably it ends up being a show about what's going on in politics and the news today as it affects black people. And I have noticed that I've been kind of getting less it's heavier every time we do the show, and it takes me a while to kind of recover afterwards, which sounds kind of like hashtag half white girl problems, but it's hard to have my entire focus, like basically the last 4 or 5 months of my life has been almost entirely focused on race in some way, shape, or form. And I never thought I would say this, but that has gotten a little difficult. And blurred vision of my friendship actually stems from this love of all kinds of things, geekdom, comic books, movies, stuff like that. When we message each other, it's usually about something in comic book news or whatever. His name is Blurred Vision. I talk about my geekery here and there as I can on the show when it fits, but we did an episode a couple weeks ago about Venom, about the movie, and we came away from that episode feeling so much lighter and so much more excited and we had been talking about doing, for a long time, we'd been talking about doing a Blurred Comics themed podcast as well, but we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves with too many things. And so now it just seems to be a natural progression for us. We almost always end up dipping into some talk about comics anyway, so we might as well just make it a part of the show because it's something that we really love talking about, especially together as well. So effective this week, we're doing the announcement. It actually aired just today. Militantly Mixed, the Black as Fuck edition is making the announcement that we're switching over to Blurred Comics. And we're still going to talk about blackness and political issues and things like that. We're still going to talk about things from our mixed race perspective because that is our lens and we can't avoid that. But we're just going to have a heavier portion of the show will now be about geekery in general. And so next week, though, that show is Blurred Comics is going to flip to Thursdays. And the following week, Militantly Mixed will go to Tuesdays. You don't have to do anything different. If you are subscribed, you're just going to see the show pop up when it pops up, as usual. But that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to take a week off for Militantly Mixed next week. And we're going to come back on November 13th on Tuesday as Militantly Mixed. Black Radical Queer doesn't change. Black Radical Queer still airs every Wednesdays. And Thursday the 8th will be the first episode of Blurred Comics. So those are some of our big announcements for ManeHustle Media. So yeah, things are looking good on the Militantly Mixed side. Let's go into the business of having the podcast. As y'all know, we are a fan-sponsored podcast, and with your support, it really does help keep us going and growing. Current sponsorship does help us with our hosting fees for the show, but our next step is to start to look into improving our quality. I've definitely been having some sound issues lately because of new residents in my apartment complex, unfortunately. So I'm going to be building some savings up to kind of soundproof my little area. And over time, hopefully, as we gain more audience and more listenership and more sponsorship, I'll be able to also hire an engineer to improve the editing of the show versus I think I'm doing fine. For my level. It's not too different from video editing from back when I used to make movies and things like that. So, but it would always be nice to improve and get a professional doing this thing. So those are my next steps if we do gain enough sponsorship for that kind of stuff. If you do want to sponsor the show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed and sponsor us as low as $1 a month to as high as anything you wish. There are different reward levels depending on what you choose to sponsor us at. And I am sampling some new swag. It hasn't gotten here yet, but I'm hoping to find a few new things to add to our rewards things to entice you to support us. For us, it's a labor of love. Any of us that do podcasting, it's a labor of love. You don't do it necessarily because you want to make a whole bunch of money, because unless you're like My Favorite Murder or Serial or whatever, you're probably not making a lot of money doing this. It would be nice to be able to make a living, just a general living off of it. But, we get to talk about something that we're passionate about, and sometimes we get to talk with people that are also as passionate about these topics as we are. So yeah, sponsorship helps us keep going. That's what it is. It's keeping it's kind of keeping things on a less corporate and more personal level. I think I sponsor a couple of shows that give me life, and so yeah, that's why we pitch this every week. I know it does kind of sound a little beggy or whatever, but it really does help. For me, knowing that Militantly Mixed hosting fees are covered every month is one less thing of stress that I have to worry about, so that I can just produce the show that that makes me happy, and hopefully it makes you happy as well. If you don't wish to do a monthly sponsorship, you can also drop us some change on paypal.me/militantlymix. Either way is extremely helpful. And it just, it also serves to let us know that we're doing something that you guys want or need out there. And don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. And you can email me at Sharmane@militantlymixed.com. S as in Sam, HAR, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, E, at militantlymixed.com. And I think that's it. Now we can go into talking about the show. My guest this week is Caitlin Borsowitz. She is awesome. She emailed me about a month before I noticed it. It actually went into my junk file. So as a result, it has taught me to check out my junk file. And she had been affected by the episode with Marie, the half Filipino, half white comedian that is the first person in real life that I was friends with that I ended up putting on the show. And she was affected by her episode, and she reached out to say that she was like crying on her way to work because she was so touched by it. And so I tried to grab her for the show. We got on Skype and had our first sort of discussion, and we hit it off really quickly. She's great to talk to. I absolutely enjoyed this discussion. She is the co-creator of the Melanin Collective, which is a organization that does professional development and enrichment events for women of color, primarily in DC. That's where they're based out of, but they have done some travel events. They did have an event out here in Los Angeles in early October. I wasn't able to go to that, but if they do come out here again, I do hope to do that. So this is born out of women of color getting together after work one day and realizing they were all struggling with the same oppression at work. And from that, this wonderful thing was created. We also talk about Caitlin's life herself. She's a mixed race Filipino and Caucasian woman. And what triggered her emailing me was about an event she had recently experienced in which she was told to stay in her white lane, which was very confusing for me when I saw her for the first time because she does not appear white. She's not white passing in any way, shape, or form. But because of her white last name, she was disregarded as a person of color. And this is a common theme that has happened in her life. She mentions a time in college that this also happens. So it was kind of crazy to hear her story when we talked before we recorded, and I just knew she was perfect for getting on the show. She describes her knowledge or her identity as a mixed race person as a blob growing up. She didn't have, it was shapeless, and she didn't really know what she was. She was an undefined thing. And so she refers to herself as the Mixed Blob, which I think is awesome way of describing it. When you don't really have a real shape to your identity, something like that makes sense. And it's a name that she can own without feeling like it is degrading in any way, shape, or form, not really having a clear understanding of her identity when she was younger. So yeah, it's great. I can't wait to share it with you. I've been talking for 17 minutes, so let's go ahead and move on to this episode of Militantly Mixed with Caitlin Borsowitz. And I do hope I'm still saying that right. I wrote myself a key, but it's a tough name for me to pronounce. This is the Mixed Blob. Thank you, Caitlin, for joining me on Militantly Mixed. I'm excited to get a chance to talk to you again. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your ethnic origin, and kind of upbringing origin story, and then we'll get into the Melanin Collective.
That's it. Yeah.
Melanin Collective. I was about to say collection. Caitlin Borsowitz.
What? One out of two.
There you go. So yeah, let's get going. So thank you, Caitlin, for joining me today. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it.
Sure. So I was honestly thinking a while about how I was going to describe myself because on all of your episodes, I hear people's stories and they all really make sense to me. But I was like, I don't even know what my story is. I think when we first talked, I remember telling you that I especially I think even recently, I've kind of described myself as more of a blob. My mom's from the Philippines. My dad's from California. I know he's a white guy, but moving through my existence, I've always kind of felt very unaware aware but unaware of who I am. So it's just like kind of recently that, you know, my identity, like especially my mixed race identity, has been more at the forefront.
Right.
And we can talk about like a couple of instances or whatever. So yeah, I mean, you know, a blob isn't really like the best word to describe it, but I just feel like, you know, I'm in that like kind of messy stage where I'm exploring like my mashedness.
Right.
And, you know, again, like there are a couple of things that have kind of led me to where I am today. But what I love about like what you're doing here is that, you know, you're giving people like me a space to kind of like interrogate that. So although I don't really have like a straightforward answer for you, I think that's kind of where I'm at right now.
No, I think a blob kind of works because, I mean, when I was growing up, the popular thing was to call us mutts and Heinz 57 and stupid crap like that, half-breeds, which I know you still hear every now and then, but it sort of, those type of terms sort of took away your ability to define who you are. Like they got to tell us what they thought of you. And like something like mutt implies non-planned breeding in some kind of way, like, you know,
dirty.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem right. So saying something like a blob, you know, it's undefined. It's you know, you're shapeless. You're trying to figure out what it is, and that makes sense. I don't see why anything that works for us.
I mean, that's exactly. I mean, I didn't like phrase it in my head like you just did right now, but I am taking that. Like, you know, there are so many people who are telling me like what I can and what I can't be, but like I'm just gonna like shut them out and say like I'm like forming my own identity in a sense. Like I've been doing a lot of reading on, I can't remember the author's name, but she does a lot of like scholarship on multiracial identity. And she basically outlines like 3 theories about how multiracial people kind of like mold their own identity. And the last one is kind of like more about being like, you're pulling from, I mean, I guess this kind of makes sense, but you're pulling from like your life experiences rather than just like solely on like your race, I guess. So they're kind of making their own like multiracial identity rather than like, I'm a Filipino American, but I have a white last name. So it's like, are you or are you not? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a crazy thing being mixed and talking to other mixed people that are at different stages of where they are in their identity and how fluid even that is. Like for me, I tend to think of myself as very comfortable in my mixed race skin. You know, I'm out here, like even my social media little blurb bios are like, I'm Black, Japanese, you know, like, you know, I'm just like all this kind of stuff. But then every now and then, if my Blackness isn't seen, now I'm in a crisis again. And I have to sit there and be like, well, what is it about me that wasn't presenting Black enough in that moment? Because, and as I've talked about on the show before, I have this sort of hierarchical view of my ethnicity, or my mixed race status through ethnicity / culture. So I'm quarter Black, but I'm culturally Black. So that's at the top. I'm, you know, quarter Japanese. I'm kind of culturally Japanese. So that's next. And then I'm half white and I don't know those people, you know, like, so I can't identify, and therefore it's just a part of me that I don't know much about. So I think, yeah, it's interesting to talk to fully formed adult people living their life and still going, but what the hell am I sometimes, you know?
Right? And like the basic question.
Yeah, and it can change given your environment. I mean, we're code switch ninjas from early on as we're trying to figure out who we are as our identity. And if we're with, you know, in your case, if you're probably with Filipino people, you're one way. If you're around white people, then you're aware of your brownness, you know.
And much more quiet, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that used to happen to me too, because I didn't grow up around a whole lot of white people. So once I became an adult and started working in corporate environments and there was more white people there than non-white people, early on, I was quiet trying to figure out what I was allowed to present as, or if I was even allowed to talk about race in the workplace, you know, things like that. So it's an interesting thing that we're dealing with even as adults, trying to figure out who we are. But you and I connected through, you sent an email because you were affected by another episode, but one of the things you sent in your email that hit me was that you were kind of being accused of being white passing, and you were told to stay in your white lane over something. And so I was ready to talk to you off of that because I like, let's get into that kind of thing. But then you and I got on Skype and I saw you on video, and my very first reaction to you was, you're accused of white passing? Because I thought I had the wrong notes for the wrong person. And I was like, oh my gosh, how unprofessional of me. I have the wrong person scheduled. And I'm looking at this brown woman who's trying to tell me that someone called her white. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what has happened to you throughout your mixedness business where you've had to sort of feel white or be accused of whiteness when you don't necessarily present that way.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing for me. And I've been kind of like reflecting on it a lot more and, you know, going back to like things that happened in my childhood and, you know, just kind of being like straight out there. So I've dealt with a lot of like mental health issues growing up, like as early as like when I was in 5th grade. I mean, like really bad, like depression, just not. And at that time, or even like up to like January 2018, like I didn't really know what that was about. But I've done a lot more kind of like research on, you know, my identity kind of stemming from situations like this. And, you know, one of the things that I keep on hearing and reading is that, you know, mixed people, they suffer a lot of mental illnesses because of their, you know, sense of like placelessness, right, or sense of like loss, that they don't really know who they are. So like growing up, you know, and just like as a side note, like it was so validating to hear you say that like, oh my God, like you're not white passing, because like, you know, for my whole life, I mean, you know, my dad is white and I benefit from kind of like, you know, the privileges that come up with being in like a middle class neighborhood. I went to a private Catholic school, which I hated, but it's just like I was surrounded by white people. And for some reason, like I could never, ever, ever fit in. And it was just really confusing. Like growing up, I never had like a friend group, even throughout like high school. Like I just didn't know like where I belonged. But I did know that like whenever Saturdays came around and it was time to like hang out with like my mom's side of the family, like I was just like, these are my people, right? Like this is food. Like this is the, like my aunt knows, like, you know, she passed away a couple years ago, but she always knew like what to make. You know, like these are the cousins that I've like known since, you know, we were like 4 or 5 years old. Like this is just like my collective. And, you know, although I never like really knew how to identify, I knew that I had a home with those people. So, you know, that kind of really informed my kind of worldview. So I guess, you know, hearing things kind of like, oh, you need to stay in your white lane was just like, but I like my white lane is just like, it's just full of trauma. And like, I don't want to be there. Like, you know, I love my dad and I love my, you know, my aunts from his side of the family, but it's just like, I don't feel like I belong there. So I think on a very like visceral level, hearing those types of things are just, you know, really hurtful, especially when they happen online. And it's just like, you know, you don't know who you're talking about. Like, you know, we kind of mentioned, like you were saying, you know, like this person has no idea what you even look like. They're just going off like maybe your last name or whatever. And, you know, I think that there's like a tendency to get like really defensive when it comes to identity, but I'm just kind of in the stage in my own like seeking, like trying to figure out who I am. Like I'm going to give like another person the chance to explain themselves, I guess, because I have no idea where they are like in trying to form their own kind of worldview. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of like where I'm at.
Being told something like that too, and I've had probably versions of that before, like basically saying, you know, I know you think you're black or whatever, but you're only a quarter, or you're light skinned or whatever. I've had versions of that. And when it comes to you from people of color, it's almost like 10 times as hurtful as when it comes to you from white, because you kind of, when it comes to you from white, you're kind of like, yeah, duh, this is going to happen. You expect it. Whether or not that's fair, it's just the case. And when it comes from a person of color, you're trying to figure out, are they saying that no matter what I'm talking about, their plight is way worse than mine because they're more established or grounded in a monoracial whatever they are? Or am I entirely disregarded because I'm pale? Do they think that I don't suffer too? You know, all kinds of things. Or do they think that I can just flip a switch and easily become white if I wanted to become white, which is not the case. It has never been the case of any mixed race person I know that looks even remotely yellow or brown like we do. That we're going to be viewed as white. Because in a room full of white people, I'm looking at you, I'm not going to see you as a white person. I'm going to be like, oh, there's another person of color in the room. I'm going to go sit next to that person. It doesn't matter what you are. It's just that you are at least something closer to me than a room full of white people. So yeah, it's like way more hurtful for a person of color to hit you with one of those things, because you feel like, you want to feel like we're somewhat on the same team. And you usually are, but then there's these times when you're not, and it's just like, I don't even know how to, even as a 40-year-old, I don't know how to process moments like that.
Yeah.
It sucks. It just sucks.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think one of the things that, like, I used to be really, like, upset about it, but now I get kind of angry, but then I try to tone back my anger and, like, try to understand, like, the context of it. But another thing, like, I was reading again, was kind of like this sense of multiracial people being like, well, so I guess like the discrimination that multiracial people experience is like a subset of discrimination. So it's like something that's less than. And like when reading that, I was like, you know, it feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like I have to not only experience like the discrimination and like trauma, but then I have to like convince people that like, yeah, what I'm going through is real just because I'm like a multiracial person. So there's that kind of, other side of it that I get really like annoyed by, but I'm trying to like just be my best self, whatever.
Well, also too, like I remember there being moments in my early adulthood where I felt like I had to be like, oh yeah, I suffer discrimination too. Oh, not as bad as you, as sort of this, Diet Coke version of being a person of color that, we couldn't possibly get the same thing. And I've talked about on the show too, different moments where I know that my light skin has given me a privilege that maybe my darker skin friends didn't get, and that I'm not okay with that, and that makes me very uncomfortable, but that it has happened. I do understand that kind of stuff happens, but it doesn't lessen the pain. I mean, it's also like saying to a person who was held down and almost about to be raped, but then something broke it up, that they didn't suffer any trauma because they weren't actually raped. They were still held down. They were still held against their will. They still suffered, like Dr. Ford that we were we're talking about in the news right now. She still suffered assault. It just wasn't maybe the follow-through assault that everybody, is kind of claiming, why is it a big deal? Same thing with racial discrimination. As a mixed race person, I'm still experiencing trauma. You're still experiencing trauma. We're being passed over for jobs. We're being looked, past or disregarded for certain levels of intelligence because we're women and we're people of color and things like that. So we're still suffering. I don't think it's a measurable thing. I don't think we could really compare suffering versus suffering. I think people deal with trauma in a lot of different ways, and those of us who do suffer from different mental health issues, like myself as well, I'm going to say that, this thing that's put me into my major depression mode right now or whatever may not in the grand scheme of the world seem like the most tragic thing, but it was the thing that triggered me going into that, and therefore it was a really dark thing for me. Someone else might have been able to handle the situation totally different, but then something, different bad would happen to them and it would send them in that same space. So I think we're disregarding people's level of acceptable trauma depending on the color of your skin or your gender or whatever the thing is. And I mean, obviously it's not fair, but we don't know. We wouldn't even begin to know how to fix that in terms of people, the culture and the people's thinking. So going through this, growing up and sort of never having a friend base of like a core group of people of color maybe, or maybe other mixed race kids or something like that. When do you feel like you're finally getting to, like in your life, when do you feel like you're finally starting to understand your mixedness or even not understand it, maybe even just identify that it's a thing that you have to feel? like feeling, so do you mean like how do I like, and I guess like project my mixedness in terms of like the people I choose to hang out with, or yeah, I mean, I guess so. I was thinking of in terms of like, for me, I wasn't aware that I was mixed race until way later, but I knew that my parents weren't the same colors, but I didn't think anything weird of that because none of my cousins' parents were the same color. So everybody in my family was mixed, and therefore I didn't have a mixed identity. That was just what was the thing. It wasn't until I started being around other people who didn't have mixed race families that it started to be obvious that there was something different about us. And then, of course, my first experience with racism is the thing that finally informs me that I'm different. And so now I know that I'm mixed race, and I have to learn what that means. That hits me in third grade. So in your case, like growing up around like white people, Catholic, whatever, when do you get to that point where you're like, oh, it's not just that I'm different. It's just that I now know what my difference is.
I feel like I'm sure that there's a lot of things that went on in my childhood that I could kind of attribute to that. Like, I just, this one thing I always remember just like most vividly was this teacher, she was my 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Martin, and she just didn't like me for some reason. So kind of in the Catholic school setting, like, actually, I don't even know if this is true for like public school, but she was kind of like the one teacher that we had, like there'd be like specialty teachers, right? But like she was the one that we were always kind of with. But I just remember like she never like took to me, right? And, I was like a really quiet kid, so I really don't know like what that could have been about. But I just remember one time we were lining up to go to church, and I was like late for a doctor's appointment, I think. And so I was coming back and I wasn't sure what was going on. And she like points at me, like looks at me like, are you stupid? Like, are you stupid? Like, get in line. And I think like as I'm talking about it, like the dots for me is like that social capital, right? Like white people are able to kind of build on their social capital together to be able to like understand situations, right? But at that time, I was like, I don't even know how to operate within this setting where there are people who don't look like me, people who don't, have the experiences that I do. So, I guess there's just like a lot of confusion on my end on how to be a person in this space. So like for me in that situation, it was just like, I don't have the social capital to like connect with you or like to be even seen like worthy in your eyes. So that was like one thing that happened. But that's like a little bit more like vague for me, I guess. In college, like I was telling you on our first call, when I was in a history class, and it was the only D I'd ever gotten in college. And I'm going to blame it on this. Not the 11 classes I skipped. But so a professor was handing back papers one time, and like the first couple of weeks of class, so we didn't really know people's names yet. But he called me up, and when he called my name and I like rose up and walked over him to get it, he was like, are you sure this is you? I'm like,
oh my God.
Me. Like, okay. So it's just like bizarre, right? Because like
I just heard you say syllables, so I stood up.
yeah. Like, okay, yeah, I'm just like whatever random name, like, hi Matthew, okay, like that's me. I mean, right? But it's just like that disconnect. Like, no, this didn't happen to anyone else but me. And I think I like dug it down into like my subconscious and never really thought about it until like recently. But I mean, like there was something about me, right, that made him react that way. Right. So it's just like kind of situations or instances like that have really like stood out to me. And I'm kind of like now just piecing them together in this like puzzle. But yeah, it's just I feel like I am releasing my soul to you right now. It's like very cleansing.
That's what I talk about the surprise, that what I didn't expect to happen. Like I just wanted to talk about being mixed all the time, and when I talked to my very first person, we ended up just like having what felt like a therapy session. It was like, oh, that happens to you too? Oh, but what about this? And by the end of it, I felt so much lighter. And I remember I said goodbye and I hung up and I walked into the other room where my husband was like chilling in the bedroom waiting for me to be done. And I was like half emotional and half kind of spaced out. And he goes, what's going on? And I said, I think I just like had the most breakthrough therapeutic session like of my life. Like I didn't know, like I knew what I wanted to do with the show. I knew I wanted to talk about mixed race. What I didn't know was that I needed to talk to other people like me who have this weird ass identity issue, where you think you're fine most of the time and then suddenly you're like, oh wait, I'm so different. This person can't even comprehend how to speak to me, like I'm normal, this whole thing. And it was so touching. And so I was like, basically it reshaped everything. It went from just like, we're just going to talk about something mixed today to let's talk about your mixed race experience and what that means for you and how you process your mixedness and how me hearing about your stuff is going to inform the way I approach this show, but also the way I approach my own identity. And from it, I feel like, I've always been a very vocal person in terms of my mixedness, but now there's no moment that passes that I can't find a way to put it through my mixed race lens and be like, you know, and and because I'm doing it every week, because I get to talk to, you know, in some cases multiple people in a week, it's just like there's just new knowledge every day. Like it's just new every day, and it means it's so amazing for me. I'm grateful to everybody that has shared anything with me, and I feel so bad when people go, well, I don't think my story is that interesting, but you know, I'm really interested in your show, so I'm going to share with you. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, you like every part of this is so interesting to me as a mixed race person, but I hope to other people as well, because it's just like I don't know, some of the things that people say just shock. Yeah. Like even being mixed.
Like exactly. I mean, I was like in my letter to you, I was like, I was crying on the way to work. Like Marie, right? I mean, she probably didn't even think her story was that interesting, but I'm like, oh my God, like so emotional. So yeah, I love it.
I did send her a message too afterwards where I was like, dude, someone else was affected, you know, like someone else was affected by you. And they're like, what? You know, she's like, oh, shut up. Everybody's is. And that's the thing that really gets me. I have a few of the discussions I've had before with people that I'm not sure until it's out how people are going to receive, like what people are going to think about it. I don't know. It's really weird, really therapeutic. And more than anything, it's just that now I know that there's places in almost any place that I can travel now where I might get a chance of meeting some of these folks in real life and be like, hi, Mixty, you know, whatever. Like, all right. So when we did talk previously, you and I talked about sort of your corporate life and how that has informed what you got going on now, what you're doing now with Melanin Collective. And there's something you did. I don't know if you did this if you did it on purpose or if you noticed you did it, but when you were talking about your family and being around, you know, your weekend Filipino family, you said, these are my people, these are my collective. And so I wrote it down. And so I don't know if that informs the name of the Melanin Collective or if that's just accidentally how you view people that are like you.
Yeah, well, so I can't take credit for the name. My co-founder actually made the name, but sure, I'm internalizing that. Take that as well. That's part of my narrative now. But I mean, really, it's so true. Kind of like the resulting, I guess, feelings I have from what kind of went on and like what led to this like beautiful social enterprise. So basically, in 2005, it was my second job out of college. I had the opportunity to work for this reproductive health nonprofit. On paper, you know, everything just like checked out. It had like everything I needed to be like this dream job. Like I loved the work that I was doing. It was meaningful. I was learning new things. I loved the team I was working for. And my immediate supervisor was just like this angel sent from heaven. Like I love her. So it had everything that I needed to be successful, right? But, you know, even within the first couple of months, I noticed like some problematic behaviors directed towards one Black woman. And at the time, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you're new in this world and you really want to make like a lasting impression and you don't want anyone to like put their eyes on you because you also have to like pay for the bills. So although I feel like guilt about this, you know, not speaking up, it's just, I don't feel like I was in the position to do so. So, you know, like what I did was just like, you know, that's an individual problem. Like maybe she is just a really terrible worker. So I kind of like put my head down and just kind of like rambled through my days, like feeling kind of like queasy and sick about it. But, you know, it's just like, it's not me. Like I gotta survive. Right. So all of that really changed kind of about a year into my job there. My supervisor decided to leave. And when she left, that was kind of like the floodgates were open, right? Like I did not realize how much crazy she had been holding back. Like she literally had to coach the executive director and the development director. Like you can't say this during like a staff meeting. Like you can't phrase things like this. Like that's not appropriate to say. And like just their blatantly racist, like bigoted, sexist behavior was just like, it was insane how unafraid they were at being who they are. Like, it was just really crazy. And like kind of the icing on top was that I became kind of the punching bag for a lot of their behaviors after my supervisor left. Like, I was blamed for things that, you know, I had like no control over, or they weren't even in like my wheelhouse, right? Like things that I, you know, didn't know how to do or were above my pay grade. You know, I was like publicly humiliated in like staff meetings on several occasions. And all the while, like this white woman who I'm working with kind of like in the same level, I'm literally doing her work, like fixing her mistakes, and she gets promoted. And all of this kind of leads to me being put on probation. So again, like the like injustice behind like me doing like this white woman's work and she's succeeding, and being put on probation for literally, like, I shit you not, they say that I'm working too hard, so we're going to put you on probation.
What?
Yeah. So that was just like, you know, and at the time I started to like lose my chill, and, you know, I was like pushing back against things. You know, I tried to set up boundaries with the toxic people, but I think, you know, me just even attempting to stand up for myself was like even more fuel for them to kind of abuse me.
Right.
So, you know, I felt really alone at the time. But that's also when I met my co-founder Doris, and of course, there's also like, you know, the education team was this like made up of like fabulous women of color, and just like on a happenstance, we all decided to get, you know, drinks one day after work, and we kind of all like realized that like, wait, like this is not just an isolated case, right? Like this is not just you being a quote bad quote like employee. You know, this is something that the executive director is like systematically like purposefully doing to like exploit our labor, push us out, and then like he remains the hero while we feel like, you know, we're terrible people. So I think knowing that I had found this community of like women of color who also could report similar experiences as me, you know, we go back to that like family. Like I found my family in a pile of shit. Literally. Right. I mean, and I think one of like the most incredible things is that, you know, kind of speaking from my mixed raceness, is that, you know, we were talking about, you know, the periods in our lives when we realize that there's, you know, we are mixed, that there is something different about us. And that was definitely one of them. Like, I did not understand why this was happening to me, honestly, because I'd moved like a blob, right? I'd moved like a massless blob in my life, not knowing where I fit in. And every, I guess, and I don't want to use like the word oppression lightly, but every like instance of trauma I felt, I just thought it was due to some kind of like lacking on my own end. I was like, this is my fault. This is happening to me. Not the fact that this guy is like a raging racist. So I think that was just one of the most incredible things that had come from that. And Doris and I kind of separately started to meet, and, you know, she expressed to me in one of our, you know, happy hours that she's like, you know what, I wish that there was a place, you know, a space where women of color could really like just get together, air out our grievances, and find community in the fact that like we are not alone in this experience, but then also like come up with practical solutions to really combat the everyday bullshit that we face, right? Because I think, so I'm from DC, and there are a lot of like professional like networking opportunities, like trainings and workshops, but they're all very tailored to like the working upper middle class white woman. And that experience just does not resonate with me. Like, people could tell me that, you know, yeah, you're like white passing or whatever, but that's not my experience. I refuse to claim that as my experience. So through like those kind of like working happy hours and brunches, we decided kind of to build something from it. So that's kind of where the Melanin Collective was born, like from this trauma. And that's one of the reasons I love it so much, is because, you know, we all individually and as a group experienced some pretty bad things at this organization. But Doris and I were able to like pull something up and make it into something that is really impactful. And, you know, we launched in March, but even now, like, we're hearing just some really great things from women who join us. And I'm just like, and honestly, in one of the first workshops, I felt tears in my eyes. So I was like, we've been like talking about this, like we've been going over like slide decks and like the curriculum, but like hearing like Doris lead it and seeing like the other experiences of other women and hearing what they had to say, I was like, this is what I've been looking for.
Right.
So that's
you created the thing you needed.
Exactly. That's a very long way to get to that point. So yeah, I get so many feels when I talk about it, because it's like my little baby. Like it gave me life. So
yeah, and that, I mean, honestly, that's the same thing with the podcast too. It's like I'm searching for this kind of stuff, right? I want to find these places in which I can be a mixed ass person, hear other mixed ass people, you know, in all kinds of environments, professional, goofy, you know, comedy, like even just finding a comedian going up on stage who randomly says, oh, I'm mixed race. And I'm like, yes, you know, like anything like that, needing to see anything like that and not finding it. And then finally deciding, well, okay, I'm just going to make my own podcast. And then from it, I get to be a fan of the people that I get to talk to. And someone will say something, you know, like what you're saying today, it sounds like, yes, that's exactly. Why wasn't there organizations already put in place for women of color to get this sort of corporate training and professional development and improvement and in a safe space? Because the common theme amongst most of us that are on this show that have talked have said something about being in a white space, you suddenly realize how much not part of the team you are, you know, and like you say, you're doing the work to correct, you know, a white woman's mistakes, and that white woman gets promoted ahead of you. And people of color, like white people, have benefited off the backs of people of color for a really long time. And those of us who are mixed with white have this extra kind of pain related to, I am both a person of color and at the same time a product of one of these ethnicities that benefit from people of color. So there's a lot of conflict in our blood and in our feelings about who we are. The idea behind this, I mean, two things. I love that it was born out of commiseration. like you just got together on this, like to drink and be like, you know what? I deal with this. Hey, I deal with this. The other part that I like about what you've said that just kind of screams out while not being directly stated is, you know, women are constantly pitted against each other. And in this case, women accidentally joined forces just through talking about what happened to them. And in that, they started to support each other. And from that, you develop this organization. I mean, that's amazing. Like, if we can change our minds about how we approach other women in business, like, I'm not in competition with you. I'm in competition with everybody in this office. But if we all pull together, we benefit, then we rise up together. You know, I think that it's certainly something that I hope to happen through Militarily Mixed, but through the Melanin Collective, I mean, who knows what kinds of things you could be doing with these events.
Yeah.
And so you primarily working out of the DC area, but I did notice from the website that you have events in other cities and things like that. What, I guess, what's the ultimate goal? Is it to hit sort of those major areas, or?
I mean, so we are in so Doris is in California a lot because of her family is based here, and a lot of her community is based there as well. I know that, like, from a very practical standpoint, one of our goals is to become sort of more sustainable. So we're self-funded right now. A lot of like all of the work that we do is kind of, you know, funded through our own like wallets and our own brains and minds. So I think, you know, there's that saying, like, you know, businesses won't be like profitable in the first couple of years. And I think we'd love to like get over that hump. But really, you know, that being the practical goal, I think the more, I guess, passionate goal that we feel inside of our hearts is to really just expand these workshops, expand our missions to like every nook and cranny that we can. Because, you know, I've realized, and we both realized that, you know, from our own experiences, this is a huge need. And from the experiences that we've heard from people who have joined us, like, this is something that they needed as well. So whether we're doing like workshops or, you know, I guess strategically and intentionally partnering with other organizations, you know, we're just trying to like really spread our word and spread our message and kind of what we're trying to do. And I think also that intentionality is a really important part too, because we really try to like walk our talk, I guess. So, you know, we hire just women of color, we pay them, you know, we're not here to just like exploit you and, you know, send you on your way. Like, we really want to be intentional about like the work that we're doing. And which is another thing that I love. It's just like, you know, we are actively like practicing what we preach, I guess.
Right. So what informs some of the subjects of the workshop? I know you talked about working on the curriculum. Did that come more from things that you initially needed yourself, and then from there you get more ideas through the groups? Like,
Yeah. So we have kind of, I think 3 like wheelhouse workshops. So one of them is about self-oppression. And I think all of the workshops are very personal for us. So we have one on self-oppression and working through the lies that you internalize from people. So one of the lies that I internalized about myself was that I was a terrible worker. And, through really interrogating like your self-talk and realizing that these are things that people are like placing onto you to keep you back. That's kind of like when you can let the chains go, so to speak. So that one's a pretty like personal one for me. The other one that we put on is interracial community building. So like what you were talking about, a lot of women, but particularly women of color, are pitted against each other. And one of the things that I've heard is like, why are we fighting to be in last place, right? Understanding that there are nuances, of course, for every experience. We are so much stronger, working together. And I think, kind of how the Melanin Collective came about is kind of a testament to that. And then finally, the last one is how to build a better relationship with yourself. So, taking like self-care, it's not just buying like a salad on a Friday to make yourself feel better. Like, that deep-rooted stuff that will like really help you like find peace in your own life and like help you prioritize yourself. Because women of color, like, we're so used to putting ourselves last and caring for other people like really strongly and deeply, but we don't do the same for ourselves. So they're all very personal and they're all very, I love attending them. I just love like listening. So like part of my job is to be like snapping pictures and things like that. But I'm like, I just want to like listen right now. I don't want to work.
I completely understand that. There's moments like that too that I have when when I'm talking to someone and like you can hear their voice light up or something like that, and while they're talking, and that kind of gives you life as well. But even because we are doing video chat right now instead of an audio chat, like to see you in those moments light up while you're talking through it, you're just like, you just get squishy. the blob gets all squishy.
I know. I think I know where to go.
It's moments like that where you feel like you're doing something right, like that you're on the right path. In the way of when I get an email like the one that I got from you, you're like, see, this is why. Like every email I read starts with or ends with me going, see, this is why I'm fucking doing it. Like this moment is the reason why it keeps going, and you get to be a fan of what you're doing, and that's what's awesome. Do you have any others that are coming up that you want to share or pitch?
So right now we don't have any other kind of in-person workshop coming down the line, but we do have a Twitter chat that we are kind of putting together right now. So with the midterm elections coming up, we decided to do a Twitter chat.
Oh, nice.
Kind of about how women of color build resistance through politics. So we've invited a couple of people, professors, kind of activists in the community, and trying to really with like an hour's worth of time, really dig into like exploring how women of color, have created kind of like lasting legacies for themselves, but then also like civic engagement movements, like how have we made our mark? So that's going to come up, I think, early November. So that'll be really exciting for people to tune in. So yeah, I kind of like when we can't touch base in kind of a physical setting, we can kind of touch base with our supporters through the online world, I guess.
Right. How did you build your initial base in terms of, people finding out about you? Was it tough, or did it seem like it was pretty obvious that people needed this in your area at least?
Well, I definitely want to credit all of our family and friends. I think they were kind of the foundation for our support. Doris put together this like Facebook group for all of her friends, and it was kind of like a brainstorming hub. Like, what are the needs that you have? Like, oh, we're coming out with this thing. Like, can you promote it? That sort of thing. So we really relied on the support of the people around us to really prop us up. But so my background is in communication, so I kind of had some like sense of what to do. I definitely wanted to have like social media presence and an email list. But I think what So while we have all of like the tactical things kind of lined up, I think what really resonates with people is just like the messaging, the kind of content that we send out to people. Like, every month we do kind of a Monday motivation type deal around like a specific topic where we share some resources for people. We have a little like bonus feature, like here's something special for you. So we really try to like tailor like the content to the experiences that women of color have. And I think, people, I mean, I get emails sometimes and people are just like, oh, like, thank you so much for this. Like, this is exactly what I needed to hear. And I think kind of through that like word of mouth, just staying true to who we are, I think that's really helped us.
Right. So one thing that I think is interesting that you guys do in terms of, you were talking about being self-funded, which I definitely am feeling right now because I'm self-funding most of my stuff too. I have a couple of sponsors, but we're still a ways away from being able to just live this life professionally forever. But I like the way you seek sponsorship on your page through it's like, help us fund our newsletter, help us fund our email account, like or that you get to select what you're sponsoring and things like that. And I think that's really a nice way for someone to feel like they know exactly where their impact would be affected. I think that's a pretty brilliant idea. I'm definitely going to share everything on all of our different sources, but let's tell people how to find you in social media and your website and everything like that so that they can look it up as well.
Yeah, definitely. So our website is themelanincollective.org, and then you can also find us on Facebook at the Melanin Collective DC, and then you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the MC Squad _DC.
Don't you love how you can't name something as like Militantly Mixed luckily fixed on Twitter and Instagram, but Militantly Mixed the Black AF edition from our other show didn't, so I had to do MM Black AF on that show. So it wasn't consistent across all of our social media, unfortunately.
I hate it, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Before we start to wrap up, because believe it or not, we have hit almost a whole hour. Is there any other kind of stuff that you? I know, right? You're just like, this is why these keep lasting longer, because you're like, no, I'm not ready yet. Is there any other kinds of things that you would want to talk about in terms of mixedness and sharing with our folks?
Yeah, I don't really think so. I mean, I guess just like coming away from this, I just like have to like fangirl because I love what you're doing, and I hope lots of people like listen and tune in, but then also contact you. Like, she responds to email, like you and tell you about their experiences, because like, there's just so much diversity and variety in the experiences of multiracial people, and I really think just like talking about it is so important.
Right.
Not just, it's like about finding your family, but then again, like making your blob into
making your blob. That's a new hashtag. Making your blob.
Exactly. TM. Don't steal it.
Just steal it. Just make sure you're credited for every time we use it.
Exactly.
No, it really is like for me. It's funny. Somebody did ask me, and I should have shared the actual message, but I didn't get permission to do it. So a person had sent me a message that said something like, "Why is it militantly mixed, but you're always sweet or something, or you're always happy?" And I was like, well, first of all, I don't think you understand what the word militant means in terms of like racial militancy. Let's go back and discuss that. But then second, like, I am fucking grateful. Like, these people are pouring their, in some cases, very painful stories, in some cases very happy stories, but they're pouring their mixed experiences out for me, and I'm a stranger. And so the fact that like you and I managed to hit it off really well really quickly when we first talked, which was awesome. That typically is the thing, but I have a few people I've talked to that it takes a kind of one or two. You and I have a different experience. We clicked right into it right away, and I think our agendas are aligned in terms of empowering our mixedness, empowering other women of color, things like that. We have this kind of thing working, at least for us to talk. But this, I'm just fucking grateful that people are willing to share their stories, and more than that people even find my show. I know I'm hashtagging the hell out of it and stuff like that, but it's still a show about mixed race identity. So when a stranger finds me and I have no way of connecting with them, like they're not connected through 6 degrees of somebody, I'm like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, how did you find me? Like, what were you looking for? And how was I able to provide it? You know, it's just good. I don't know. I think the militancy comes out in sort of my vocalness about mixed race people and my push to empower us to be as mixed as we want to be and unapologetic about it. You know, I think part of that, plus I have a resistance type of mentality in terms of, my political slant is more towards things aren't working right now, so we need to fix things. So carrying that over into this is like, yes, be loud, be your mixed ass self, be comfortable in your own skin. And it breaks my heart. Oh my gosh, it breaks my heart every time a person who has been kind enough to share their story with me says something to the effect of, you kind of made me feel like I had permission to be mixed, or, thank you for allowing me to be mixed. And I get what's being said there. I totally understand. It's like, you provided a place that allowed me to break this open, and I don't normally break this open. But the wording tells us so much about our society and our language that we're meant to bottle down what makes us who we are and just kind of toe the line. And providing spaces like the Melanin Collective, like Militantly Mixed, like a lot of these other people that I'm speaking to, like they're providing spaces for people to just be themselves. And I don't know why we weren't already doing that. Like, I don't know why that isn't a part of our culture.
I feel like being yourself is a very political action, being able to like express who you are, like that's not something that I feel like coming into, 26 years of age. I mean, I'm just starting to understand that, being yourself isn't just kind of like a la-di-da thing. Like, it's a very political act. Like, you are saying, screw how you think I'm supposed to be. This is how I am. This is what I'm going to like give to the world. So yeah, I mean, like that's, I mean, I feel like I'm also in some sorts of stages where I'm like, who am I allowed to be? So I totally like resonate with that, like sadness that like people, have to ask for like permission to be who they are. But then also understanding that that is not just like a neutral thing. Like, you are taking a risk doing that. Right. So, I guess hats off to you, I suppose.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely risk involved, but I agree with you. At your age, I would not have thought, like, when I was 26, I would not have thought it was very political or radical to be my mixed ass self or to be outspoken about who I was in any way, shape, or form. It just, I guess the climate at that time wasn't like that. But now, you look back and you're like, well, why wasn't I shouting on the rooftop this whole time? It's not like I couldn't see this stuff was there, but our culture dictated how we were allowed to view it. And now our culture is kind of jumbly and crazy. And so you're getting windows into, oh, wait, no, this is messed up. I need to speak up about this in a way now that didn't exist when I was, at that age at that time. So,
yeah. I mean, I think my last thanks. I know you have to go soon. I'm very sad.
No, but we can keep going. If you want to keep going, we can keep going.
Oh, no, you have an event. So I am like,
I do, don't I? I mean, I don't care.
All right. I'll give you a last soundbite. How's that? But I was just, what you were saying about, what we were talking about, being yourself as being a political act. I think that's also for like mixed people. I think that also speaks to the fact that I think apprehension or discomfort around multiracial people, I mean, that just didn't crop up from like nowhere. Like, that's something that's like part of American history. And I think that like recognizing that discomfort is part of our history is also really important for people to understand, because again, it puts into context, like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just the societal discomfort at, mixed raceness. So I don't know. That's just something that I've also kind of like put into my mixed race backpack to kind of like remind myself of whenever I get like uncomfortable at things, or like, am I allowed to be in this spot, or like just like blah,
Right. Because if you think about it, like in particular white men, but I think white people in general, and I'm talking about in general, I'm not saying everybody, but they get to walk around feeling comfortable taking up space all the time. It never occurs to them not to be comfortable taking up space. So we have to adopt that mentality. You know, if, like I was talking to somebody the other day about, or actually like a couple months ago, but I've just reheard the recording, so it sounds like the other day, about a person just like touching my body to physically move me out of the way so they could grab a Snickers bar at a grocery store. And I was thinking, like, I would never reach out and touch somebody to scooch them out of the way who wasn't in my house, and I'm not like, you know, play wrestling, you know, whatever like that. I would never do that in a public space. So what is it about that person that gives them that entitlement and that privilege to just be like, I'm going to put my white hands on you and move you out of my way? I don't want to go that far. I don't want to say, yeah, let's just start touching people's bodies and move them out the way. I want to say, like, we need to have that same level of confidence in taking up space, be unapologetic about where we are, be unapologetic about advancing in our careers when we advance. You know, don't look at it as, you know, thank you for allowing me to be here. Look at it as, you're welcome that you get to be in the presence of somebody who's different from you. You know, I think if we start to have that kind of confidence and adopt that mentality, things will change, because that's a common theme, and I hate hearing it. At the same time that I have also been in those same places where I'm just like, oh, you know, I mean, I've done it recently. And as vocal as I am, when I am confronted with moments that shut me down like that, I get so angry after, you know, angry at myself, angry at the system, all that stuff. I think there's something there to dig into further. I do have that event, and I've been kind of hedging all day because the introvert side of my ambivertness is kicking in really hard. And I know it'll be beneficial to go, but I just like, plus it's across town.
I understand.
And LA traffic. So like my mentality right now is, yes, I know it would be beneficial, but right now I'm already doing something I'm enjoying.
And you have to take care of yourself.
And I don't have to leave my house, and I have to take care of myself. Yeah, mental health is certainly something that is important to deal with. And I mean, we talk about it here and there on the show, but man, it's a killer, that anxiety of having to be yourself out in the world. But at the same time, I'm trying to promote a podcast, and I should be out there more often. But yeah, I already feel like I've talked myself out of going to this thing.
I had nothing to do with it.
No, you didn't. It was entirely me. Like, I could tell even before we were about to speak, I was like, you know, I should probably get myself all the way ready so I can leave after. And then I was like, nah. It's the worst. I'm the worst about it. But yeah, thank you first for your initial email, for being cool about my delay in getting to you because it was in my junk file, like everything. I've loved the connection that we've had in this brief amount of time. I do hope we talk, you know, way more. I ended up being like a big fan of everybody I talked to because, you know, I wouldn't have met you, you know, some kind of way. And now I know this thing that you've done, and it's amazing. And that's what it's like with most of the people I get to talk to. Like, it's just,
we're all here doing something so cool. We're all doing amazing things.
Right. So yeah, I love it. I'm so grateful. I am really grateful for the people I've gotten a chance to talk to. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Right. Thank you. Talk to you.
Bye.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.